All right, at 7 o'clock, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge.
With allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So make a note that Councilman Bueller, Studnicka, and Brungard are absent. Old business approval of minutes. The regular meeting minutes of March 16, 2023 were provided for review. I need a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of March 16, 2023 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Mr. Clemens?
Yes.
Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Kirby?
Yes.
Mr. Major?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Motion passed. Audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda? No takers. Presentations, Citizens Academy graduation. The 13th Annual Citizens Academy graduates are Krista Holland, Michelle Riggs, Marilee Thompson, Emma Njoku, Micah Stillwell, and Zach Bolin, and we'll be giving them a plaque and a photo opportunity if you want one.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead and stay up there, Zach. I'm going to take a group photo.
Fill the box. They've already been pulled out.
So presented to Zach, Citizen Academy class of 2002. Sure.
Okay, go ahead and move over this way.
I don't, you're free to stay and listen to the rest of it, or if you'd like to leave, that's fine too. Item number 3 is the Arbor Day proclamation. Kevin, you gonna read that? Jason? Jason, you receiving that?
Yep.
Okay.
Jason, can you turn the mic towards you guys? Can you get up there? You want me to?
In 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. This holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world. Trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. Trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. Trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. Trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. The City of Lansing has been recognized as a Tree City USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation and desires to continue its tree planting ways. Therefore, the City of Lansing in the state of Kansas proclaims the 14th day of April in the year 2023 as Arbor Day in the City of Lansing, and urges all citizens to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands and to support our city's urban forestry program. And it also urges all citizens to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of present and future generations. Okay.
Thank you. We're going to do a ceremonial tree planting next Friday, 10 a.m. at Bernard Park, if anybody's interested in attending.
All right.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Item number 4 is the countywide transportation study. Jeff McCarroll from Kimley Horn will update the City Council on the progress of the countywide transportation study. So, Jeff, all yours.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Thank you for having me here today. Rest through this. To kind of set the stage and take us back a little bit for where this project started. Over the past several decades, there have been a lot of ideas for transportation projects in the county, the surrounding regions, but there wasn't necessarily a priority on what ones to pursue necessarily, and not ones to pursue as a region collectively. A lot of the funding sources that are out there, particularly with state and federal funds, really focus in on the opportunity for people, and they want to hear more than one community is for a project. Excuse me, it is allergy season, so, and now controlled bird season in Kansas, so it's a little. As we're looking at that, and keeping in mind a few programs coming up, for instance, KDOT this fall will have what they call their local consult meeting. Some of you may have heard of that or participated in the past, where they go out and solicit ideas for transportation programs. Those communities that speak together and rally together have a much higher chance of success in getting funding. And to be quite honest and frank with you, some of your neighboring counties and communities do a much better job in the past, and they've been rewarded with more transportation projects. So the goal here, one of the goals of this project, is to really identify as the county as a whole, working with all the communities, what are those projects we can rally together on and really focus it on. We're going to take you through tonight a little bit about the approach that we're going through, talk about some of the engagement activities we've had, go through a little bit about how we took those 20 plus years of projects and developed one consolidated list of projects. Then we'll talk about how we're going to evaluate those projects. And the evaluation methodologies we do are technical. They're measurable ways that we can evaluate a project's impact. But how you prioritize those, that's where you put your values to that. And we'll go through that process and show you a few examples through that. So we've got a lot to cover. At the end, we'll show a few draft results We're really wanting to get feedback and input through this process. We'll be back in front of you again in a few months as this starts to wrap up and come to a close. Yeah. As we get through this process, we will also have a online meeting where everybody can dig in and actually see what's being looked at here and dig into the details if they so choose. And we're down. All right. So to start with, this is kind of the approach that we began on this project. We started out really down two paths. One was to take a look at the criteria that different funding sources evaluate projects on. So the Kansas Department of Transportation has their own criteria. Mid-America Regional Councils, they look to distribute funds, has their own set of criteria. The federal government, there are federal competitive grants that are out there and available, very large grants. They have their own set of criteria. And they're going to look at your projects through their own lenses. But you also have your own values as well, and we want that opportunity to come forward and look at that. At the same time, we started looking at those projects that were out there and really to start to understand were there other projects that people wanted to see looked at, what else was out there. As we developed that list and pulled those two different issues, the criteria and the projects together, we started to develop a tool that could set a framework for how you could evaluate and look at these. Today, next slide there, we're here. We're at kind of a re-engagement. We want to hear what your thoughts are. Are we missing things? Do you have some questions that we can better address? And we'll share some of the feedback we've gotten over the past couple of weeks with you as well. With that, once that's completed, we will go out. We want to hear from you first, that we'll take this out to an online forum where people can go in. They can actually start to evaluate what their priorities are that might be different from yours or KDOT's or the federal government, and see how that might change those projects. Next slide. So we have a series of stakeholder meetings in the fall. We had just over 40 participants. They focused on key groups like industries, port authorities, chambers of commerce, school districts, to gather their input through that process. Next slide. We heard some common themes through this process. One was there was a desire for better connections between communities, from Basehor to Lansing, from Tocanoxie to Leavenworth, really to emphasize that as a priority, to make sure we had that intra-county travel going on. A lot of support, recognize the importance of K7, being that lifeline down, if you will, to I-70 and a lot of the metro area. We heard a lot of support for bicycle accommodations. Now, I won't say that was bicycle accommodations at the cost of everything else, but just recognizing there's a growing influence of people with that desire to ride bicycles. We heard from the economic development community as well that those were things that started to attract businesses and residents. Sort of importance there. We heard about that balance of the quality of life with the rural environment, how those interplay to each other. We've got a lot of the county that's rural and wants to remain that way, and that's seen as an asset. We also heard clearly that MoDOT doesn't have any plans to extend 152 to the west right now. But there are some communities in Missouri, because we actually met with and called in some people from different areas outside of the county to get their thoughts. Parkville came up and said, we're kind of interested to see what that could develop and look like. As we're going through our project, the Panasonic plant, news of that broke, so there's starting to be a lot of interest about what can we do to get better access to the south of DeSoto and all those jobs that are coming in Panasonic. And lastly, we heard that if we're going to talk about road projects and transportation projects, by and large, we want to talk about improving the roads we have, not building new roads on new alignments. We asked that group to start to prioritize what was important. Next slide, please. And what we heard from the group of stakeholders was really economic impact was their driving concern, followed closely by equity or access to jobs, so that if you build a project that makes it easier to get to work, that was a priority for them, followed by congestion and safety. Next slide. We also went out to have public meetings. We had actually one just downstairs and another one in Basehor to go out and ask the public. And we had just over 70 attendees on that. We asked them a lot of the same questions, And some of the feedback we got was access to Panasonic and DeSoto was important. It was certainly on the top of everybody's mind. We also had maps of the county and all the road systems we had, and people started to identify several key locations and spot locations where they're worried about. This is an intersection that's tough to see at. Here's a section of County Road 5 that doesn't have shoulders, and we're worried about that. So we got a lot of that feedback in place. We heard again about the desire for bicycle routes and trails. We also heard very loudly a desire for visibility in the process. That they wanted to be sure this wasn't a behind the scenes, behind the books, the loudest political voice got to sway what the outcome was. They wanted to be sure it was transparent. And that everything you see tonight, everything you'll see will be made available to the public throughout, so they've got the ability to see where that moves forward. The other interesting thing that came up was the Patriot Highway is a project that had been proposed in the past, and we showed and talked about. There was a lot of very strong voice against that project that came through. Next slide. We talk about what the public's priorities were. Economic impact remained number one, but you saw safety rise up, as well as mobility and congestion a little bit too. Next slide. Not everybody goes to public meetings in person anymore, so we also held one online. We had a lot of participants, several hundred actually went through a website and looked at it. 55 people provided specific comments. Some of those common themes were support for some sort of connection taking you down, almost like an outer loop to 435, not necessarily a freeway, but that sort of connection that could be built. Again, a lot of spot safety issues. People could zone in on maps, take a focused look at locations where they wanted, and they would make a comment there. There was little support for projects on the west side of the county. Years ago, as an example, KDOT identified a new US 24 and 40 alignment, which would go from Tonganoxie west. There just wasn't a lot of support for that. People weren't necessarily in favor of it. There wasn't necessarily a lot of people against it, but they just weren't seeing that as something needed. And I think the County Road 1 interchange had a play in that there was another way to get there. And again, we heard that desire for bicycle accommodations. Next slide, we talk about priorities, and online safety rose as the top concern we heard from people as we talked with them, followed by very closely economic impact and mobility. Next slide. So this map is what we've showed. It's still out on our webpage today. This was all those 20 years of projects combined in a map. And you'll see there's a lot of projects that overlap with each other, that are in close proximity. You wouldn't build one and the other. Wouldn't make sense to do that. Some of them had corridors on new alignments altogether. In fact, one of them, the Patriot Highway, is an example that largely went through a floodplain and a low water place. It'd be a very expensive place to build a road. So we took the feedback we heard from the public. We took input from a lot of staff, and your staff was involved in this process as well, and developed what we use as our really consolidated project map to move forward. Go to the next slide. 43 total projects were identified here. They range in price from less than $500,000 to one project well over $350 million. Some of those projects we looked at in isolation. For instance, a lot of interchanges being added to K7, but you could certainly combine those to evaluate those as one project too. Others of the project, for instance, there's a north-south corridor being talked about that combines 158th all the way up to 20th Street. That could certainly be likely built in phases as you went forward. Again, that total, about $1.5 billion worth of projects identified. That's not something we're going to build all at once. How do we prioritize that? Next slide. One way we look at that is what we call travel sheds. And this idea that we can actually show how long does it take you to go in 10 or 20 or 30 minutes. What number of population can you impact? What about the number of jobs, number of attractions or destinations can you get to? And you compare what we see looking out into the future today versus if we add a project. Next slide. For instance, the Eastern Gateway, which is that extension over to the 152 highway. And you can compare the two, and what does that change in your impacts? Next slide. As you overlay that, we can calculate what's the impact of a change of access to population, a change of access to employment, or key destinations. If you build this project within 30 minutes, can you get to more parks and grocery stores and medical facilities than before? So we're able to quantify those factors. Next slide. We broke down and evaluated the project in several key areas, and we'll step through those. Try to keep this moving at a good pace here. So if you want to interrupt and ask questions, please just do so. We looked at traffic operations and user delay, safety, access to amenities and population. How does those change if you add a project in there? Access for economic development and jobs, equity, sustainability and resiliency, and then some other factors as well. A couple of those to point out is those numbers of partners that are impacted by the project directly. That's one of those things that scores better. If there's a project that comes out that's impacting multiple communities, it scores better with KDOT and the regional process with the federal government. They see it, think of it just getting two birds with one stone. They like to see those projects, and they become more competitive. The other thing is project readiness, and we talk about this here with environmental clearance is a big way. If we're talking about federal funds, we go through the NEPA. Some of you may have heard of this. And depending on the complexity of the project, a different level of documentation is needed. At the easy end, it's categorical exclusions, or CEs, which is a simple permit to get through. On the far side of that is an environmental impact statement. And that comes into really when you talk about like the major river crossings. Those are going to take years to get through that public process. And then we'll talk about cost as well, certainly identifying the cost impact of the projects, not only to build, but to operate and maintain over time to keep them in good condition. Next slide. So the tool, and I know you can't read that, and this is, we're in development stage, it'll be online, you'll be able to play around with this. But you're really going to be able to go through and sort the projects by their types. So if you want to compare interchange projects with each other, you'll be able to sort and select that and zoom in on those results. Major roadways or several projects, multimodal projects, you're going to have that visibility to how you compare those. You also have the ability here to start to weigh what is your priorities. If you want projects and really think that economic development should be the top category, you can weight that higher than others, and you can see how that impacts results. Next slide. Under the categories, we'll step through these. On traffic operations and user delays, we really talk about change in volumes projected out to year 2050. We did that with Mid-America Regional Council's regional model. But also, what does that mean for congestion, and what about reductions in delay for vehicles? So we can quantify that with these projects. If you build this, if you build a new interchange on K7, you're going to reduce delays so much, and we can put that value out there. We normalize those functions to come up with the scoring, if you will, on traffic operations. Next slide. We also look for access to opportunity, economic development, and freight. And this really breaks down into a few different categories. In fact, if you move to the next slide, we have two scores we looked at. One was the population and amenities access, which means if you build a project, what's the increase in population that's available? So if you think about your businesses, how many more people are available to get to you within 30 minutes? Access to destinations, those locations. If you build a project and you get to parks, to grocery stores, to schools, educations, how many more of those are within 30 minutes of your route? With access to destinations as well there. We also took a look, and this is a question that comes up in some federal grant applications. Is the project located within a quarter mile of a school, within a quarter mile of a park? Those are some of the criteria some look at. The other factor that we look at here is that economic development. That's access to jobs. If you build a project, how many more jobs are available for your residents to get to within 30 minutes? Same way with, we took a look at the increase in commercial industrial land. So if you build a project, is it easier to get to areas that are zoned or master plan as commercial? Likewise, what is your proximity to an interstate? When you think about freight resiliency, a lot of companies look at that. How quick and easy are you within 15 minutes of an interstate? If you build a project, does it make it more convenient for that? So we can quantify those as we go forward and use that to develop our economic development score. Next slide.
Hang on a minute.
Yep.
Before you go past that, if you go back, what do those numbers mean? For example, that Eastern Gateway North connection. For average increase in population within 30-minute drive, you've got a 90. Is that
If
a
you
good,
take
is
that
bad?
back one more slide. So what we did is we actually made the hard calculations, which is changes in population. We were able to calculate that to see what those were, and then we took those numbers and we normalized them to a scale of 0 to 100. So everything was kind of relatively compared with each other, and it made it easier to have that score as a basis. So good question. Yeah, we started with, actually when it came to, for instance here, the West K10 connection is pointed out that with that project, 6,800 more jobs are located are made within 30 minutes because of that project is out there.
So when you look at the Eastern Gateway, the North connection there, would that be an increase, 25,952, and an increase of 12,000? I mean, that's a huge increase in population and a huge increase in traffic, right?
Yeah, correct. And if we go back to the consolidated project map, let me clarify.
Because that would be really good news, is what we're saying.
It would, yeah. So that's
that-
good to have that increase in jobs.
Yeah.
So if we look at the project map, because I think the Eastern Gateway one is a project we broke up into actually two projects. So on the blue line that you see in front of you today, I'll see if that almost works. There we go. That's listed in this table as the Eastern Gateway. The North connection is actually, once you get across the river, it's a connection up to Eisenhower Road.
Yeah.
That Eastern Gateway North connection,
Yeah.
you see that same sort of impact if you build either the Eastern Gateway project, the new river crossing, or if you improve K5 down to 435. Both of those have a significant impact there.
Yeah, and that's what we want to. That's what we want to see in here is how are we bringing industry and how are we increasing population and how are we building Lansing up bigger and better?
Correct.
A city with a future.
Yep. Absolutely. So going down and yes.
On that
Kinda
same
what
one,
I'm
if
trying
you
to
go back to project two,
Mm-hmm.
Go back to one.
the project. Now, I guess the purple up there, S13, that's Eisenhower Road,
Correct.
okay? Where's McIntyre Road on that? So McIntyre would still have a connection, it'd just be on that southern loop.
Correct.
So all those roads and access that are at the Highway 5 now aren't going to be just abandoned. So you just have to go another route to connect 435.
So
We need to show you that gateway thing. That's what we need to do. We need to show you that. I think the county commissioners have it. Jeff Culberson has it. It's really good. Really good layout.
The drone footage.
The drone footage and the plan for the Eastern Gateway Bridge, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I just don't want to have to follow a cow or a goat trap.
No, it's
Call it McIntyre.
4-lane like a highway.
Yeah.
It gets rid of all the danger, Highway 5, up and down, danger curves,
Oh, yeah.
you know.
and that
It eliminates all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, my daughter had to go in the ditch once because of Highway 5.
There you
Yeah.
go.
and the Highway 5 project here is rebuilding that to modern design. So when you talk about that, it's a big project as well. So
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Appreciate it.
Mhm. Yep, I'm working now. Equity is another area that we look at. This is three different categories of that. One is areas of persistent poverty. The other is historically disadvantaged communities. And the third one is opportunity zones. All three of those categories are federally defined, and they've defined what block groups or census tracts that those fall into. The only place that comes into effect here is in the city of Leavenworth itself. They're the only ones with those three categories. So we're able to take and estimate what's the impact to those communities, and we normalize that score once again to show. So these are projects that really only would impact directly the city of Leavenworth. So not to say the others aren't good projects, but as you score and as the federal government looks at some things, they'll rate that a little higher, and the rest of your project value, if you don't have an impact there, has to overcome that when you're competing for those funds.
But if we're doing a consolidated package where Basler, Tonganoxie, Lansing, and all that in the county are going in together on K5, the Leavenworth numbers would still be in there.
So
They're still affected.
they are still impacted.
So,
Yes.
so this presentation is focused on the effects to Lansing.
No, this is the general. This is the effects overall, not just the city of Lansing. We gave you that example of Lansing when we showed you those travel shed maps, but it's countywide, those impacts.
Per project. So if you go down the project list and go over, those are the ones that are most impact direct.
Yeah, it just, he was saying that Lansing had the disadvantaged numbers, but that chart did not have any numbers in it at all.
So if
Lansing, but Leavenworth.
That is the disadvantage.
Yep.
So, I mean, they give credit for
Correct.
equity numbers, of which only Leavenworth hit those categories for equity numbers. So we would get a lower score because we didn't meet any of those. That's what he's saying, I believe.
yeah, if a project's not influencing those areas, you're right.
No.
So now, when you go through and test that, you might decide as a county and city you don't want to take that into account, and you can look through and not worry about that equity scoring when you prioritize for yourselves. And you might see it change a little bit of the prioritization, but just recognize that when you apply to the federal government, they're going to look at that. So you can take that into account. Another area we looked at was sustainability and reliability, and some of the categories there include changes in vehicle miles traveled, or VMT. So if you build a project and it reduces how much people are driving, that's reducing emissions in the environment, and the category we can look at there and quantify. We also took a look at that project that was going to replace a bridge that was in poor or fair condition that we knew over the next 20 years was going to need to be replaced. So you talk about resiliency of your investments, that you know that's something and you're going to maintain infrastructure in good condition. We took a look at what if we had water crossings, low water crossings that we're actually going to be able to improve, so that as we have those extreme weather events and rain events, that you've got your road system that is still more usable, that's not flooded and underwater. We also took a look at planned bike routes. Was the project on one of those? So that people, if they choose to travel a different way, have that option. Or are you filling in gaps and sidewalks and things like that with your project, so that people have that mobility option? Can we normalize those scores as well for the sustainability and resiliency? Another category we looked at was safety, and this was one that we can quantify as well. We took a look at the past 6 years of crash data and the severity of those crashes. Now, as a nation, we've gone through and we've done a lot of research to know that if you do certain improvements, if you take a road like County Road 5 and add shoulders, or add the rumble strips, you convert an intersection that's a two-way stop controlled at a high-speed road into a roundabout, we know how much on average we're going to reduce crashes and injuries and fatalities, and we can quantify that as well moving forward. That's used to calculate our safety score for these projects. Then we hit those other categories. We hit on that briefly. Are you in multiple categories? What's that level of environmental clearance you're going to need to go look at? We're going to look at costs. We'll talk here in a minute about some things we've added that you're going to see next time you see this, and that is a cost effectiveness, where we take a look at a bit of a benefit cost analysis for those projects also. And that brings us to this tool, and we'll show you a couple examples as we walk through that. Again, what we want you to do, and it will look different here in a few weeks when you have the chance to play with this, but to show you the functionality, you'll be able to sort the projects by the type of project, be it a new road or a major roadway project versus a spot intersection improvement. And you can also then start to say, where do you put your values? If you had 100 points out there to give, where do you rank? What is your priorities between safety and economic development and those categories? And you can start to put that in. By and large, what you'll likely see is projects are grouped together, and that the same 1 to 3 projects will always kind of be in that same category up top. Now you can always get in there, and I'm sure you're all smart enough to figure out if you put everything in one category, you might see a project drop from the bottom of the list to the top. But it's visible how you do that. You're answering that question. If I'm saying economic development is important and critical, what does that mean some of those best investments might be for you? And you can change those around. So this is an example of one where we altered that. And we'll show you some examples here in a little bit. Now we've gone through, we've had about, I think, 7 of these meetings here. This is the 7th one this week. We had one in Baser a couple of weeks ago, and we've heard a little bit of feedback I wanted to share with you all because we want to hear your feedback also. Again, we're still developing and fine-tuning this tool. There's that desire to both look at combining some projects like the K7 interchanges, but also taking a look at some of the long corridors and saying, what if we broke this up into smaller pieces? How would that help us evaluate that? There's the desire to look at cost effectiveness a little bit more. While a project might score great on economic development, your return versus your investment becomes an analysis to take a look at a little bit as well. We've had some additional information on resiliency. We've already talked about the low water crossings. The other was, what about paving gravel roads so that they become safer and more resilient in major storm events. Another thing we've heard about was the desire to look at expanding the economic impact. So when we talk about impact as we evaluate these projects, what was your access to these different areas? Well, we looked at what was in zoning or comprehensive plans for commercial and industrial type developments. Recognized and was brought up to us, and was a good notion as well, that regardless of what the zoning or capital improvements, if you build a new interchange in a rural area, you're probably going to see commercial and industrial development occur around that. So that recognition, and we'll start bringing that into the calculation. Initially, when we looked at this, we talked about freight access to I-70 being one of the things we evaluated. I-70 is the designated freight route in the state of Kansas. Brought up 435 should be considered as well, so we'll take that into account also as we move forward. Now we'll show you a couple examples of the actual projects where they are today. What we took was those priorities we heard from the stakeholders. And we took the priorities we heard from the public. And you'll see that the results are slightly different when you look at those. And we kind of combine them two, and they're a little bit different again. But what you'll see as you go through this exercise is, by and large, the projects kind of group together, which gives you that ability when you think about talking through what do you want to emphasize as a project. You're talking with your partners in the county about, here's the 2 or 3 projects for KDOT Consult we think we should go after, because they're all important to the county, and ideally you would all support each other, even if it's a project not in your community, but you recognize that it's good for the region, and you weigh support in that. Sometimes that project will get awarded to your neighbors, sometimes to you, and maybe 2 years later it's changed around a little bit, but you can see those tools and priorities and kind of what rises there. So the first example, and this is certainly draft, was the priority basis we heard from the public, where traffic operations and safety were important, economic development maybe a little bit more important, but not dramatically more than those 2 factors. And you saw in this case the 158th Street corridor, which included a new interchange with I-70, kind of rose up there, and K5 was not far behind. If that priorities changed a little bit, you saw K5 actually move up to the top and expanding that facility. But those projects are all grouped right together, just a few points apart from each other. And you start to see, you're starting to see that again, that there's a few projects that really move the needle more than others. And then you combine them and it changes slightly one more time. So next steps for our project, we want to hear from you. Any thoughts you might have, questions you might have. I know we threw a lot at you. You're also going to get the chance here in a few weeks to dig into all of this yourself and see the information behind that. We're going to make that available to the public through online mapping and research and websites so that you can dig in and understand that. Our goal is to get back in front of you perhaps in May. We've had a couple delays just with the county commission, had to push us back a couple of weeks, so it might be early June. But we'll have a draft report in front of you and be back to answer and dig in some more to these questions. Our goal is to wrap this up here this summer so that you are ready when KDOT starts their local consult program. Which you might be aware happens every 2 years. They come out and look to the communities and say, what do you want to see happen? What is your priorities? And certainly the goal and aspiration is that as a region here of Leavenworth County, you all can unite behind a few projects and advocate those. That's what your neighbors do, and they start to secure more funding because they do that. And that's the goal with you here. It is a competition. When you look at these other federal grants that are out there and the regional grants and state grants and just recognizing the best position yourself for those gets you those returns. With that, happy to open the discussion, go through any of these in more detail, or we can just be at your mercy here. So.
Well, getting back to your comment about working together, I think we're doing a better job. There was a time when in this county was, I got mine, you get yours.
Right.
And I'll use the airport as an example, the proposed airport. Everybody was for it until the recommended site was in Lansing, and then everybody else said, good luck. Where we would all have benefited from an airport, everybody. So what we all need to keep in mind, I think, is what's good for one is good for all of us eventually.
Yeah. I was
And we can't lose sight of that.
absolutely. I was involved years ago in it was a multi-state project. It actually went across 9 states with that same effort, looking at a major freight corridor and talking about the enhancements and all of that. And they would identify one project to go after, and you would have 9 different state departments of transportation and governor's offices putting in support for a single project. Maybe it's in Idaho, but Minnesota was still supporting it. And that raised a lot of eyebrows and really got a lot of attention. The same thing happens here when Tonganoxie recognizes a project in Lansing and says, we're going to put our support behind that because of this, or vice versa.
Well, it was interesting to see the K5 and the Eastern Bridge connection, that gateway connection, how that's still ranked in the top 10% in your last few slides there. So our surrounding communities see the need and the amount of traffic that connects us to 435.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or connects us from I-70. There's a lot of people that bypass I-70 in the intersection and coming up 7 the whole way, and they'll come up 435. But to get from 435 to Lansing is, it's Highway 5 or parallel or Leavenworth Road or something like that. It's either way. Lansing's kind of out of the way. We're just kind of here versus the connections, And not that gateway would benefit Lansing, but it would increase that freight traffic, which brings in industry.
Mm.
We get industry in here. We have a humongous Leavenworth County
Yep. And
project off Eisenhower that's not being used at all, that the taxpayers are paying a lot of money for that industrial center, and it sits empty. Well, the reason it's going to sit empty is there's nothing that gets us, like you said. It's hard for freight to get here.
Yep. And both the Eastern Gateway project, when you take into account that northern extension section we talked about,
right,
and K5, have similar impacts.
Yeah.
Both of those, upgrading those facilities, upgrading K5 makes a big difference as well. So yeah.
It does. There's a lot of traffic that comes up 5 every morning and goes back 5 every afternoon. But there's trucks that have to use that.
Yeah.
There's trucks that are coming down parallel in Leavenworth, and there's trucks having to come. That gateway and that K5, expansion or improvement helps all of our communities,
Yeah.
especially Leavenworth, as big as they are, right within a rock throw of where that would be. But somehow, some way, we just got to work really, really hard to get that voice over
Yeah.
to our surrounding communities, elected officials, and appointed officials, and so forth. 'Cause
When you
that's our future.
when you look at the big projects on this one, it is those that provide alternatives to K7
Yes.
or upgrade K7 that move the needle the most. So the K5 and Eastern Gateway is two examples. The 150th Street corridor to 20th, which becomes a north-south route parallel to K7
Right.
that really, it connects three different communities as well, and that has a big impact. So
I travel K5 every day. I come home that way every day, 5 days a
you're a
week.
brave man.
And
Yes, he
yeah,
is.
I can drive in my sleep, honestly. But I can tell you right now, traffic on that road is 10 times what it was last month. You know why? Because of parallel and 7 highway construction. People are going the back way to avoid the construction. So traffic is 10 times what it was. Now, when you were showing your study earlier, you showed the number of wrecks on Highway 5, which was a big number.
Mhm.
So with 10 times the traffic, there go the wrecks up, right? So, I mean, it's just the impact. And then I noticed on a couple of your slides, safety was a small, like number 3 of the impact. So people aren't thinking about safety, it looks like. They're thinking about other things.
Yeah.
When you travel 5, I think safety. So, but it would be nice to have a better route, that's for sure, because K5 is not a safe road. You go around the curve on K5 with a tractor trailer coming at you, you have to stop sometimes. But
Yes.
yeah, right now the traffic is 10 times what it was just because of construction. So I think about the impact that it would make if there's going to be more construction on 7 Highway in the future, with all the interchanges being changed for years to come. Will that impact K5 or the Eastern Gateway project?
Sure it will. I mean, especially when because originally K7 was supposed to be kind of like a freeway, right?
Yep.
Now it's not from here to Lansing.
Now you stop every mile.
Now you're stopping everywhere, yeah, which defeats the purpose of the original intent. Get on this and run like it's a highway and go.
And
Somebody opened up the door and they got interchanges all the way.
Or anybody else have any specific
Yeah,
questions for
one of
Jim?
the, we talked about yesterday, one of the side effects that the KDOT would look at is, as we open up the 5 or the Eastern Gateway, and take traffic down that way, that's going to extend the life of K7 and some of these other routes people used to take. So you're actually getting a domino effect there. And if you really want to lower property tax, get industry in here. That's what we should be doing.
Well, and it will also impact wrecks too. Because I work in Kansas City, Kansas, so the main reason I come home the way I do, I come up 435 to K5 and come in the back way. Because if you come up 435 and you get on I-70, you get off in Bonner Springs at 7 Highway, what happens? It's a bottleneck right there at the stoplight. Because nobody wants to go at that right turn right there. And people stop constantly and get rear-ended there. So you have to avoid that intersection. So by moving traffic away from dangerous intersections like that, when you create less accidents.
All right, anybody else have any questions for Jim?
Thank you, sir. Appreciate
I
it.
appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, new business. Item number 5, the Sands Construction asphalt price increase request. Staff received a request from Sands Construction for funds in the amount of $28,578.37 to cover the cost of asphalt due to the large increase in fuel prices last summer. Staff met and discussed this request and decided as an alternative for consideration to ask Sands for a price on some additional work that could be completed inside the park. Sands Construction proposed patching and resurfacing the outer loop of the original parking lot and the road, adding a flagpole, a gate at the entrance of the new parking lot, a sidewalk adjacent to the parking lot, and a sidewalk to the batting cage. So there's 3 different motions that you can make on this item. A motion to deny Sands Construction request for $28,579.37 to help offset the asphalt price increase, or approve Sands Construction request for the $28,579.37 for the asphalt price increase using funds saved on the installation of the power line, or approve a change order in the amount of $212,709.61 using reserves from the general fund for the additional work. Anyone want to make one of those
Mr.
motions?
Mayor, I make a motion that we approve Sands construction request for $28,579.37 for the asphalt price increase using funds saved on the installation of the power line.
Second.
Okay, so that's the second motion. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I've got a couple of questions.
Not sure I want to word this.
Go ahead.
On the bid process, how much of an increase would there have to be before it would have affected the original bid? Because Sands was the low man, so.
So the next closest bidder with all the alternates as we accepted it was around $42,000.
It was 42. I had put that bid tabulation up on the dais if you guys have
Right.
that.
So the point I'm making is the 28,000, even if it had been in there, it would not have changed the bid. They
Who the low bidder was.
Right. By about $10,000.
Right. And I know that we're not underneath the federal acquisition regulation, but in the military, we recognize that sometimes we let out a contract that should have had another avenue in it because we just didn't realize it a risk mitigation. And I don't think anybody wants a local company or a company that's providing service to take a hit because of something that wasn't in their control. And that's my thinking, Mayor, on those 2 points.
Okay. Anybody else got any comments?
I'm good. I'm glad we had this discussion to clear things up for me a little bit.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Call roll.
Mr. Clemens?
Yes.
Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Kirby?
Yes.
Mr. Major?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Motion passed. Item number 6 is concession stand contract. For some time, staff has been considering hiring a concession contractor. And we put out an RFP for concession services, which was released earlier this year. The one proposal submitted was by Jarvis Shaved Ice. The contract was drafted and submitted for the City Council's review. So I need a motion to approve or deny authorizing the mayor to execute a contract with Jarvis Shaved Ice to operate the concession stand at Bernard Park for the 2023 season.
I move to approve authorizing the mayor to execute a contract with Jarvis Shaved Ice to operate the concession stand at Bernard Park for the 2023 season.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
A second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this one?
Yeah.
Quickly.
Go ahead, Marcus.
I'm sorry. This doesn't prevent fundraising events, i.e. teams, parents, anything like that wants to work so much or so much of the stand price or anything like that? Or is this a contract where we basically have tried every avenue and this is about the only route we can go now to ensure we always have employment operating this? I mean, that's the reason why we're doing this, right?
Yeah, I mean,
And over the years, we've tried and tried and tried, and
yeah, and
people don't show up, or people just don't even want to work.
I think we would struggle in the past with volunteers on things. You know, maybe 80% of the time the volunteers would show up, but sometimes they wouldn't. Sometimes we would have.
Paid help too.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a struggle finding paid help. Yeah, it's a struggle finding paid help. I know Jason would have to go down to Sam's Club regularly to get all the inventory. So this makes it easier for us, and you know the city would be turning a profit on it. We'd be receiving 10% of the income from it.
Are they here?
They are not. They were not. He's a baseball coach, and they had a game tonight, so he was not able.
Okay.
He was not able to attend. But everything, I would go along with everything Tim said there. I think it's a wise move for us to at least give this a run. Take the onus off the city to supply that socket all the time and try and find staff to run it. And I think potentially we're going to get some better products too.
Now, once stock is in there, Jason, once stock is in there, is it upon us in case something gets broken into? I mean, Gene and I have worked at a concession stand, and sometimes we've shown up and it had been broken into, and we're out that. We have to restock it.
Right.
The city's not restocking this.
We are not. So we won't be stocking it. they'll be in charge of stocking it, and if I'm not mistaken, Greg, in that contract, there was something specific about that, that they would be responsible
Yeah.
for any insurance to cover any of the contents of
Right.
the concession stand itself.
And let's see, we're requiring him to carry the commercial general liability insurance. Does he already have that? Does he know he has to get it?
Yep.
That's a big number.
Yep.
So, okay.
Yes.
He actually already has it and has already provided it to me.
I didn't
So-
see a copy of it on.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So I just want to make sure he had it.
Yeah.
And then,
I noticed in the contract, it doesn't state when he's going to man the concessions. Do you know if it's his intent to have it open when regularly scheduled ball games are going on? Or do they have to be a certain size?
That's the discussions that we've had with them, is that they're gonna be open, whenever we have games going on out there. They're very interested in running it. If there was a tournament group that comes in or anything of that nature, they're interested in anything that we do, so.
so this is for one season. We give it a try.
Yeah.
If it works out really
I think
well,
for both parties, I think
Yeah.
it's
okay.
the best way to
Worth a
go.
shot, as
Yep.
much as we've struggled to keep it open and man it and all that. So it's definitely worth a shot.
And it might become a model if we decide to do something at the aquatic center.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, do we have a motion?
And a second.
Okay. A motion and a second. All roll.
Mr. Clemens,
Yes.
Mr. Gardner,
Yes.
Mr. Kirby,
Yes.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey.
Yes.
Motion passed. Item number 7 is mobile message board quotes. Staff solicited quotes for a budgeted mobile traffic message board. 2 quotes were received. The Vermac 1500 full matrix for $20,170. The vendor is Seahawk Construction out of Eudora, Kansas. Wayne Company WTMMBA full matrix was $20,320. The vendor was Streetwise out of Grandview, Missouri. So I need a motion to approve the purchase of the Vermac 1500 full matrix message board from Seahawk Construction in the amount of $20,170. And I'll just add that it was budgeted for $25K in the budget, so it's under budget.
Savings.
So moved, Mayor.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this one?
So you have your own sign.
Yes.
We will all use it.
And this one is KDOT interoperable with their system.
And you will share it with other departments.
Oh, everybody's excited.
I'm paying for half, that's why I'm here.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
No, for real.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Call it.
Mr. Clemens,
Yes.
Mr. Gardner,
Yes.
Mr. Kirby,
Yes.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey.
Yes.
Motion passed. Item number 8 is mill and overlay bid. Staff solicited bids for the 2023 mill and overlay project. 4 bids were opened on March 30th, 2023. There were 3 alternates that were also bid on. Number 1 is Sycamore Ridge Drive. Number 2, West Gilman Road. And number 3, North 2nd Street Alley. Staff recommends accepting the alternate number 3 in addition to the base bid. So I need a motion to accept the bids and the unit prices as presented and awarded in the 2023 mill and overlay project base bid, alternate number 3, and 5% project contingency to Little Joe's Asphalt, Inc. for a total cost of $923,686.31.
So move.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this one?
We're not settled on diesel or anything like that yet, petroleum. Are we going to hear?
No, there was no indexing in place in this. We do have some more information on indexing. We've been provided how City of Raymore does it. Theirs is a lot less complicated than KDOT's. KDOT is a very convoluted, but we did not index on mill and overlay last year either, and they've programmed the risk as they see fit in their bids. We do not anticipate any kind of.
Because I get where last year kind of caught you off guard with the inflation doing.
Yeah, no, it was 36% more than I thought it would be in asphalt prices last year. I put it in big again this year. I thought it would be $82 a ton for asphalt. It was $85.80 a ton for asphalt. So it's there, but it's more in line with what we expect. I think the one thing that we should take from this is that we anticipated $100,000 in cost for curb repair, and we are looking at $202,000 in concrete curb repair as part of this mill and overlay. The curbs in Lansing are falling apart, and we are in dire need of funding to adjust this. And we do, we really do. When we go through and do a mill and overlay, we fix all the bad curbs, but it's now taking surface away from us at a pretty significant rate, and it's putting us farther and farther behind.
And they're not old curbs either.
No, the 50-year-old curbs are in better shape than the 20-year-old
Yeah.
curbs.
That's bad.
Yeah.
Concrete's going up just as much as asphalt.
Yes.
I would say more.
At this point, maybe more. Yes.
Yeah.
I think concrete's also they're having trouble getting it delivered. I don't have anybody to drive it.
So is the mix different for the curbs than it is the sidewalk? Are they giving you a different mix, like a?
No, we actually about 8 or 9 years ago we adopted the Kansas City Materials Board (KCMMB). It's the curb and sidewalk is the same, but about like 8 years ago they accepted this mix. That's what Kansas City uses, and that is the mix that they're obligated to provide now. So we changed our specs probably 8 or 10 years ago to make sure, in response to essentially the curbs.
Okay.
We don't use that same mix. They're using a much more robust aggregate now. So.
Okay.
Are we getting better results?
I want to make sure we're not still putting the same stuff down for a higher price.
Got the granite now.
Excuse me.
Just using the granite.
Yes, this is the KCMMB. Yes, this is the high quality aggregate. That's, it's better.
Right.
Is it as good as the 70-year-old stuff?
Better, but it costs more. Well, I mean, it does.
If
But
we
there's,
get,
well, there's a reason they switched to granite, and it's holding up better than the old concrete. So, yeah, you get what you pay for.
There's 2,000-year-old concrete in the Coliseum that's still there. That's because 2,000 years ago, anybody can make 5,000-pound concrete. Now an engineer can only make exactly 5,000-pound concrete. Sorry.
Okay.
Is the new mix holding up better?
It is. We are getting better performance with the new KCMMB mix.
Any other questions for Mike? If not, we have a motion and a second. Call roll.
Mr. Clemens?
Yes.
Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Kirby?
Yes.
Mr. Major?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey?
yes.
Motion passed. Reports. City attorney.
That's a report, Mayor.
City engineer.
Had his turn.
City administrator.
So I think, I know some of you guys had reached out to me about yards that were torn up last summer from Clearwave or AT&T. I know Clearwave was back in town today. You can see some areas where they started patching some bald spots and grass. So hopefully they'll be getting through the rest of the town pretty soon. And also, they're making just fantastic progress on that intersection. I'm not sure if they wrapped up all of the asphalt today, but they were pretty darn close when we were out there around 3 or so, and then hopefully striping shortly thereafter. So close to being done with that project. We are thrilled when that will be done. So that's all I have.
We're having a ribbon cutting, right?
Ribbon cutting on Thursday.
Yeah. Okay.
We have scissors.
All right.
The big
ones?
We have a big scissor. Yep.
All right. I need some big scissors for that. Okay. So let's go around the horn. Dan?
Well, we, on the land survey for the Leavenworth County Port Authority, we're going to be meeting the second Friday of every month, probably for the next year. And as we go through that process, I've already talked to Tim. I'll do up some minutes or something and have it as part of the package so it doesn't extend the time of the meeting itself. And if you have questions on it, you can just shoot it to me or ask it in the council.
Okay. Great.
And I want to thank the Citizens Academy, because I really appreciate having citizens understand our government and being able to get involved with it. So I appreciate your attending. It's everything.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, congratulations to everybody from a previous academy member myself, so thank you.
That could happen to you.
I was in the very first one.
Run.
I did have a lot of questions on the Sands construction project, but thanks to Tim and his responses, a long, lengthy phone conversation with Jason and a visit to the park with Gene, all my questions were answered. And while we were out there, I grew up on the city fields, grew old, grew out of them, and we drove out there, and I know it's not completed yet, but wow, it looks great out there. It is very impressive when you go out there and take a look at that, and I can't wait to get out there and experience the ball games. May even coach again just so I can get on those fields. Anyway, that's all I have.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Gene?
Yeah, echo what everybody else has said, and I also want to take this opportunity tonight for all of us to remember the Kansas City, Kansas police officers who stood in the line of fire yesterday for all of us. And my understanding is they took possession of hundreds of fentanyl pills and powder. And this is a good time to remind parents that if you haven't had that talk with your children, it's time to have it. As I attended, and Dan and I did, the one pill can kill, and that's, you can't get any plainer than that. So let's remember them and all of our emergency responders. And tonight I would ask everybody to pray or think of former council member Trinkle, who is in and his entire family as they continue down this very difficult situation that they find themselves in. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Gene. Marcus?
Yeah, I'd like to thank the Citizens Academy. Thanks a lot. I know some of them already left. I really appreciate it. And then share the word and get the next group signed up. You all have friends. You all have it. So excited that you all are learning all about our city and our government and everything we have here. Hey, Jason, great job. Arbor Day proclamation. Appreciate it. Great job on the parks. I know we got ribbon cutting coming up pretty soon. And I tell you, it's really exciting coming into my neighborhood off Gilman and seeing all the soccer going on already. I mean, I get excited. I mean, all our parks are being full with soccer and soon to be baseball, softball. It's good stuff. It's beautiful weather. And then I want to thank you, Jason, on the concession stand contract. That's forward thinking. That's what we're talking about. You know, that's good stuff. And Mike, congratulations on the message board and the mill overlay. Great job, man. You got your own message board. I know you've been working really hard for that.
Half a message board?
Yeah.
Okay, so we give Tony a lot of money every time he comes in to everything asking for money. So
Well, Jason gets to use it too, so.
All right.
Anyway, but hey, thanks, Tim, and thanks goes out to our first responders. I appreciate our first responders and our city staff. You're all working really, really hard. Tonight we had a full-blown meeting, and I can't thank everybody here for coming. And tell everybody else to come to our meetings, please. We love seeing you. Mayor, that's all I've got.
All right, thanks, Marcus. Jesse?
You know what everybody else has already said. Congratulations, graduates. We appreciate you signing up for the program, getting involved, and seeing the way the city runs and the things that are involved in it. Mayor, I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adjourn. Call roll.
Mr. Clemens?
Yeah.
Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Kirby?
Yes.
Mr. Major?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.